Atilio Boron, you're one of the most important left-wing intellectuals in the world. And, well, certainly in Latin America. Would you accept that?
Perhaps. I am more modest in regarding my own accomplishment in that field. But
Left-wing
anyway.
people are always too modest. People of the right are not modest.
No. They tend to be very arrogant. They know they have the truth and they have the power.
Well, at least they have the power. I don't know if they have the truth.
Well, they believe they
believe
they have the truth. And they do have the power.
They do have the power.
And they have a system, a systematic power is outreaching all the world. No? I am really impressed about that.
The world now is a very upsetting place.
Yes.
It's very hard for human beings to tolerate the things that we're seeing. The war in Ukraine, the war in Yemen, the destruction of Afghanistan, poverty rates rising, inflation creating hunger. It's a pretty upsetting place. Does the world upset you?
Absolutely. I am really very saddened because of the situation that you mentioned, which is, I would go as far as saying it is an unprecedented situation. Because in the past we have some of this problem, but now we have all that. And you have not mentioned, but I know that you think of that, climate change, which is a major challenge to the survival of our species, as Fidel said in 1992. So it's a very complicated and grave situation for the future generations, not only for us. I am thinking the people, teenagers today, what can they expect of this kind of war? Wars, famine, unemployment. Even if you are employed, the money is not enough, the salary is not enough, the wages are not enough. So it's a very depressive landscape. I hope that we should overcome this situation. I am still confident in that, but it will be a very long and fierce battle.
You know, right after the period of the Nazi capture of power in Germany, the great German Marxist Ernst Bloch wrote a book called The Principle of Hope, in which he made the argument that hope is not an afterthought. You know, when you write a book, it's not like the last chapter or the last sentence says, well, we will prevail, you know. Hope has to be structured right through the thinking. This is an upsetting time, but how would you put hope into the story today?
Because I don't believe that human mankind would commit suicide. And that I think that we have the theoretical tools who could be the guide for the transformation of the world. So we are not naked in this enterprise. We have the tool. We can understand how the system works. And this is the precondition, the prerequisite for change the system. If you don't understand how the system works, you cannot change it. But we know how. And the predictions and the prospective thoughts developed within the framework of the Marxist theory have given us a very sharp picture of what reality is today. And we were right. And Vijay, I say our founders and the followers of the Marxist tradition were right when they say that this is going to happen. And it did happen. And this is why I think that the principle of hope of Ernst Bloch is working here. Because when you write this book, okay, you know what I mean, recovering a fantastic character like Ho Chi Minh, it's because you know that all this is not a dead letter, it's something that's living. If you go to Vietnam, you see that Uncle O is still there, inspiring the struggles of the Vietnamese people. So I think that our criticism is grounded on hope, as you rightly pointed out a few minutes ago.
The theory is one thing which comes true it's anticipated, it comes true. Hope structuring the thought is also there. We have a serious organizational problem. Can you talk about the organizational problem we have for our ideas, for our reality?
Yes, I think that when you talk about organizational problems, you are touching a critical issue, at least in Latin America, because we have been victims of a very, very successful campaign promoted by postmodernists in the area, in which they say that organization concerns are things of the past, that we don't need that. And I'm talking specifically the case of Harold Negri. You remember a book which was very, very influential, extremely influential in Latin America, which prompted me to write an anti-book, you see, called Empire and Imperialism. It was published in English too, okay, in which they say that organization was no longer the matter. And I say that today, in our times, we are struggling against a highly organized worldwide capitalist elite, okay, in which you cannot defeat an army which is very well organized with a disorganized, chaotic agglomeration of people who want to do something good, who want to create socialism, who want to fight against capitalism, but without any type of organization. This is, you don't need to resort to the game theory to know that you are going to be the loser in that game, because the guys who are very well organized will prevail in their struggle. But this is an idea which was very, very fiercely rejected by all these postmodernist strengths. And I think that today, just to round up the response to your question, we need to have popular masses which have adopted or cognizant of the main ideas of the socialist tradition. For that, the reading of the Communist Manifesto, as you propose one day to have all people reading, is fundamental. They have to have the awareness, the consciousness of the necessity to change capitalism, because for many people think that the capitalism is the last stage, okay? That there is no alternative. Or as Fernando Cardoso said, within capitalism there is no alternative, out of capitalism there is no salvation. He said, okay, he was wrong, but he was representing an idea very strongly ingrained. So you need consciousness. But then you need organization, because you cannot prevail in a struggle if you go in a chaotic attack, move against the fortress of capital, which is very well organized. And then you need adequate tactics and strategy. Because sometimes what happens is that you have very powerful left-wing movements, people very, very conscious, but applying a strategy which is not adequate, or tactics which tend to backfire against the popular movement. So you need the three pillars of the successful collective action for the left. You have to have the masses with consciousness, socialist consciousness. You have to have the masses very well organized, because now we are living in an era, in the digital era, in which the formats of organization can be changed and can be improved. There are many things, very contradictory things with the digital era, okay, because that will help the dominant to crush us, but at the same time, we have a powerful weapon in our hand, because we can coordinate worldwide movements against capital, which before were unthinkable. How could we combine with our friends in Kerala, for instance? Impossible. No, you have to go to Kerala, or they have to come to Buenos Aires. Now we can do that with a smartphone. So that's something very, very important. But this impinges on the formats of organization. Is the old classic traditional left-wing party still the most effective form of organization? I have some doubts about that. And you see, for instance, the fact that there is a sort of, I wouldn't say desertion, but in other words, less important participation of the youth in this kind of organization. And we should ask ourselves, why is it? Why are the young generations not coming to the left-wing parties as they should come? Perhaps because there are something in our culture, in our organizational culture, in our language, in our modes of communication, which are not the most appropriate to capture the imagination and the willingness to struggle of the young.
So that's interesting because when Hugo Chavez won the famous election and became the head of government in Venezuela in 1999, he went back to the past, revived all these stories of Bolivarianism and so on, used the concept of Bolivarianism to create a continental aspiration. He made, with other comrades, the ALBA process. Well, out of that came the ALBA Movements process. We are at the Third Continental Assembly of the ALBA Movements. What would be your message to the people who follow, the development of this process as a kind of organizational form?
Well, I would say that we have to be very strong in our convictions that we should never admit the idea that capitalism is a system which can be reformed and produce a good society, that capitalism is a system which is the murder of Mother Nature and also the murder of society, and that even if we have suffered many setbacks in the recent years, there are some notes or some flourishings that things could change in the future. And I am confident that at the end of the day, we should prevail and we will prevail. And that's my message to the people of this conference, and that this public deliberation, open deliberation without hierarchies, without formalities, I think is one of the key ingredients in the process of political conscience, awareness, and political mobilization, and that they are doing a fantastic job keeping alive the flame created by Hugo Chavez so many years ago.
That's amazing. I almost want to ask you about the first time you fell in love, but I know you hate talking about your personal life, so...
Well, it was with one person who was studying with me in the university. It's a typical student loving, you get in love with something which is you admire very much because she was very intelligent, very smart, very good person, very tender. And of course, I fell in love. I am a human being. I am not only a Marxist theorist. I have all the pluses and minuses of a common person. And I really appreciate your work because the work we are doing with the Tricontinental Institute and all your writings are being very, very illuminating for many people. I mentioned what my students say when I recommend some of your writing, and they are really, wow, so this is a guy we would like to know. So, congratulations.